everyone, I'm Christine. I am the nerd of The Art of Nerd, and thank you for watching this video in advance. This is the first thing I've ever put up on any kind of social media of this kind, so forgive me if it's awful. It probably won't be, I think, because who doesn't like listening to stuff about Star Wars? But anyway, I hope to kind of like iron out what this is going to look like going forward. And, you know, maybe get some segments in here that are a bit more conversational or kind of set topics or stuff like that. But anyway, so this is my first video, so thank you for watching. So I thought I'd maybe just do a couple of things today. So first, tell you a little bit about me and what I'm probably going to talk about, and then talk about a Star Wars topic, and then finish with a little Star Wars poll that I had going on Twitter this week. So first, a little bit about me. I am a proud member of several different fandoms. So probably the two biggest of those are Star Wars and The Lord of the Rings. You know, standard nerd things. Obviously, I love both of those. Also Star Trek to some extent. That one I'm a lot pickier with because I find a lot of the stuff great, but also very 80s, 90s. So a little bit dated. That being said, a lot of universal truths and awesomeness in it. So, you know, I wanna give it that at least. But yeah, but by far the biggest two, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. I think I like those two things for different reasons. So Lord of the Rings, I love enjoying. Lord of the Rings, I do not overanalyze. I do not speculate. And I think I just love enjoying the world and being immersed in the world. I read the books when I was 13 or 14 and kind of was in love with it from that point. I've seen the films a lot. I could quote significant parts of the first one at least because that's the one I've seen the most. I've read kind of all of the expanded universe things, all the sort of missing tales, all the other stories that Tolkien wrote about Middle-earth or in Middle-earth. So that one I just really love being immersed and not questioning it too much, just enjoying it and you know, just kind of really letting it wash over me, just letting the whole experience wash over me. I also apologize in advance for the glare in my glasses if there's any of that. I'm still trying to figure out if I continue doing these where exactly my setup's going to be. But today, for now, I'm just recording in my room, which has a little bit of weird lighting. But anyway, so that's Lord of the Rings. Star Wars, it's definitely something I do speculate about and do overanalyze and do overthink. And I enjoyed that just as much. I've been a fan to varying degrees of Star Wars since I first saw it. I never didn't like it, but I think the way that grew was definitely over time. I grew to appreciate it more as I got older, and I think as I kind of got more into you know, discovering the expanded universe, which is not something I really did until the past few years, that made me like the films all the more. I was kind of a prequels kid, so those are the ones I remember coming out in the cinema. So I think I was maybe 7 when The Phantom Menace came out. I don't know if I went to see that one in the cinema when I think about it. I don't even know if I went to see Attack of the Clones in the cinema, but I think even if I didn't, I saw them very soon after they came out on VHS because people were still using that back then. I definitely went to see Revenge of the Sith in the cinema, and that was one of the first memories I have of going to see something when it came out. My sisters and I went with my mom. I remember her taking us, and we were all very excited to see it. So clearly that by that point I had some kind of investment in the films. But anyway, so we definitely had a lightsaber that kind of quoted sayings at you. If you kind of played with it in sort of a gentle way, then you would hear Obi-Wan and Yoda kind of saying, you know, like, use the Force and, you know, feel the Force flowing through you. But then if you got too aggressive with it, it would tell you things like control, you must learn control. So definitely trying to keep us on the light side from a very early age. But yeah, so that's kind of who I am. I've started this just because I want to and because I want to have fun with it, because I like talking about the different things that I love, and most of the things I love are pretty nerdy, so, here I am making a video. So what I thought I would talk about today is something that's kind of been on my mind for the past few weeks since I started getting more active on Twitter, especially involved with like watching different Star Wars podcasts and videos and kind of seeing how people interact on social media. And that's the idea of being what I like to call a conscious fan. So I touched on this really briefly in probably the one other social media video production that I'm on, and that was a podcast called Never Tell Me the Odds with the Rebel Scum podcast, and you should definitely check them out on YouTube if you haven't done so already. They're pretty cool. But anyway, in this video I was talking about my love of Star Wars and how I would label myself a conscious Star Wars fan. And what I mean by that is I love Star Wars as a whole, so let me preface this and let me put this in sound bites so everyone can hear this. I love Star Wars. I am not someone who's coming on here to troll Star Wars, because I will be the first to pull out my list of 100 reasons why everyone should love Star Wars if someone says they don't really care for it. So I just want to get that out there. But anyway, I would also say that there are parts of Star Wars that I recognize are not the strongest in terms of the way that they were executed. And I think that is probably the case with most things that have gone on for 40 plus years. If you have any franchise that has gone on for any length of time, any world that is being built, there's going to be problems with it. And that is something that I'm okay with. I am okay with the fact that there are parts of Star Wars that I do not think are as strong as others. The prime example I like to use is Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. I think I would pretty safely say that the execution of that film is relatively weak, if I'm going to be diplomatic. If I'm not going to be diplomatic, I'm going to say it's not a good movie in a lot of ways. I think I'd say that mostly from a technical standpoint. So the writing of the script, as someone who has not studied script writing, but who's watched a lot of films, a lot of Star Wars films and read a lot of Star Wars stuff, but just a lot of films in general as well, who's read a lot, and who's studied, writing to some extent, as part of my degree. I studied English literature. The script writing is not strong, and I feel fairly confident saying that. I'm not saying that there's nothing good about it, but as a whole, it's not a very good script. The acting also has peaks and drops. There are some very strong actors in it. Ewan McGregor is great, and I think, we would all be super excited for him to come back. So here's to hoping that new Disney Plus series is going to be Obi-Wan series to some extent. If you're listening to this, Kathleen Kennedy at all, be great. Anyway, but to get back to that, Ewan McGregor, great. Ian McDiarmid, great. He as Palpatine, perfect. That being said, there are other main characters, namely Anakin and Padme, who are not necessarily the strongest acted. I think it's kind of fairly commonly known, at least among Star Wars fans, that Natalie Portman wasn't really as into the films at this point. Her relationship with George Lucas was fraught to some extent, and so she, maybe didn't give 100% in all of the films. Not saying that she's sort of terrible, but she wasn't as invested, and that's kind of pretty common knowledge, I think, if you've looked into behind the scenes at all. Her chemistry with Hayden Christensen, again, because of that, isn't always the strongest, and I think that comes out in a lot of the scenes where they're together, which is a lot of scenes in the film. So altogether, not the greatest film. I'm going to be really not politically correct and say straight up that I think that the romance between Anakin and Padme is one of the things that makes me really uncomfortable watching TV. Every time I watch the scene where Anakin and Padme are in front of the fireplace, and he's getting a little bit stalkerish and a little bit creepy, and he's cutting up her pear at dinner. Also, the fact that she wants to marry him after he's confessed that he's killed an entire village, like that wasn't a warning sign to her at all. It's all a little, I would say, a little uncomfortable for me. That being said, I still watch that film all the time. Well, not all the time. I still watch the film a lot. And I like watching it. I enjoy watching it. Even with the things that make me uncomfortable, I enjoy the sense of sitting through that in order to get to parts that I do enjoy. So, I love the battle on Geonosis. I love when all the Jedi show up. You know, when like OG Mace Windu is there with his purple lightsaber, like, you know, like this party's over. And then all the rest of the Jedi show up and they have that amazing battle, you know, with the clone army out in full force for the first time. That's great stuff. But part of the journey to get to that highlight is watching the stuff that is not so great. And that's absolutely fine with me. You know, as what I would say a conscious fan, part of the experience of enjoying the Star Wars universe is knowing that there are those things that aren't as strong in it. And it doesn't make me like the franchise any less. In fact, I think it kind of speaks to the strength of it in that you can have a film like Attack of the Clones and still have people who are really invested in the franchise and in the Skywalker saga. And I guess you can maybe think of it as like a friend that you have, you know, think of like your close friend, one of your close friends. And, you know, or maybe, I don't know, like a spouse or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. But just think of somebody close to you. And, you know, when you first got to know them, you just thought this person's amazing. You know, we get along really well. We both have this in common. You know, we like this thing. You know, I really like this bit about them. And that's all really great stuff. And then the more you get to know them, the more you explore, the more you get involved in their lives, you realize that they have flaws, like everybody does. And I don't mean like terrible flaws, like, you know, they have a bad temper or stuff like that. Just like quirks. You know, you have your friend who I don't know, chews their food really loudly and that, you know, really annoys you. Or, you know, whenever they come to your house, they, you know, they make a mess. Or, you know, you live with somebody and they're always leaving their socks on the floor or, you know, never cleaning up after themselves. That kind of thing. But yet, because you're so close, you don't mind those things as much. Like, sure, they annoy you, and sure, you're like, why don't you stop, you know, leaving your socks on the floor? Why do you chew so loudly? Like, you do ask those questions. But you acknowledge that they're part of the entire person, and that there are way more things that are positive about the person than negative, so you take the good with the bad. You don't pretend like those things don't exist, but you allow the positive experiences to form the bulk of your memories and the bulk of your relationship with that person, whoever they may be. And I feel the same way about fandom. I think one of the great things about fandom, it is kind of like a relationship to that, you know, to some extent. Now, I don't mean that like you should become so obsessed that it's kind of your entire life or anything like that. But, you know, as someone who really enjoys Star Wars, even with Lord of the Rings, you know, any fandom that I'm part of, I'm like, there are things about that fandom that aren't as great. For me, Attack of the Clones is probably the epitome of that. But there are different things, even in some of the good films, that I'm like, you know, that wasn't perfect. But nothing is. Nothing that I think I've ever seen created or written or put on film or produced is perfect, with maybe a couple of exceptions. Maybe I'll talk about those one day. Or, you know, they're as close to perfect as you can possibly get. But something as big as the Star Wars universe is going to have flaws in it, and is going to have things that are not as strong. And I think the problem that I sometimes come across in fandoms, and this is not specific people I have in mind, but just like as a whole, is you see people who are a little blind to the fact that that can be the case. Or maybe they're not confident in it, or they just aren't secure in it, I don't know. But they basically will kind of, if you point out a flaw, say like, you don't know what you're talking about, or that's not true. And I get being invested in something. I'm really invested in the stuff that I like. And obviously I don't want people to attack it, because in some ways, you know, okay, maybe you're not attacking me personally, but you're attacking part of who I am, and part of what makes me me is the stuff that I like. So I kind of get where that person might be coming from. But what I don't get is being so invested in something that you refuse to see the entire picture and kind of put these blinkers on. And I don't think that that makes for a very good fandom. You know, one of the things I think about is when I was growing up, a lot of the stuff that I was into wasn't really that popular with my peers. So I kind of felt ostracized enough already being into stuff like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings as a teenager, especially particularly in my neighborhood. It probably wasn't this for everybody, but there weren't a lot of people who were into that. So I kind of already felt alone in some of the tastes that I had. And then when I discovered that there were other people who were into it, you know, you go into that community, and when you become part of that community, especially maybe as someone new, you don't want to go in there and then meet opposition when you've kind of been when you've kind of met that same opposition kind of your whole life from like the outside, and then you finally find the inner circle, and you're like, yeah, I like X, but I don't necessarily feel strongly about Y. And then for someone in that community to be like, well, you can't be part of this fandom because you don't like Y. And I sometimes worry, especially with kind of the rise of the way that the speed with which we're able to respond to things, and the accessibility that we have to other people's, you know, around the world, you know, with things like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, that sometimes fandoms can become a little bit like that. And it's not great. I think a great thing about the fandom is that you should be able to really enjoy the good things about something, but also kind of take the not so good things, or if you want to say straight up bad things, and enjoy them because they're bad. You know, so like I said, with Attack of the Clones, I still watch a film and I still enjoying it, and I enjoy the awkwardness of laughing through some of those romance scenes that are really not that great. You know, I enjoy quoting, you know, I hate sand, because we all kind of know that, like, that's not really the smoothest part of the film, and it's not really the best acting. Like, that's why that thing is so popular, because we all are able to kind of collectively chuckle at the kind of misstep that was that scene. And I think that that's perfectly okay. You know, and if we want people who are new, or maybe not as obsessed as I am, or maybe some other people are, to enjoy the fandom, we can't be a fandom that kind of cuts people off from the moment they express an opinion that something is slightly weak. You know, we have to be conscious fans. And that's, I think, the people that are the sort of most, you know, the most accepting of other people's opinions when it comes to a fandom are the ones that I really enjoy watching, you know, that we're listening to, like the podcasts and the blogs and the videos that I watch, are people who say, you know what, at the end of the day, this is a fiction. Now, I am as immersed in that fiction as anybody else probably could possibly be, but at the end of the day, it is a created thing that we all kind of enjoy together. It's not my be-all and end-all. I'm not personally attacking anyone who's been part of that or who enjoys those things. And I respect that somebody might think that Attack of the Clones is the greatest film ever made. You know, we can have a healthy debate as to why I disagree with you, but that's part of what makes being part of the fandom okay. And also, I enjoy the collective chuckles that we can have over stuff that isn't as strong. And that to me is the ideal fandom. So I'm hoping that, you know, as the sequels wind up, and as we start getting new trilogies, new films, and new shows on Disney Plus, that like there'll be a selection of people, either in my own acquaintance or just kind of around the world, that will be those conscious fans. Because I think those are the most enjoyable fans. And if we're honest, those are the people we all kind of enjoy talking to the most when it comes to our enjoyment of different things. And it makes it fun. It makes it funny sometimes. Sometimes the funniest things about a fandom, particularly in Star Wars, are the things that aren't so great. You know, and that's absolutely fine. So I think that's something I'd like to see going forward, something I'm certainly going to try to do. And maybe all 2 people that watch this movie, maybe think about, you know, like, comment, you know, like, what are parts of the films that you found that you were like, I really enjoy this film, but I didn't like this part, or I didn't like this film at all because of this. And that's something that we can talk about. It's something that maybe someone will say, yeah, I didn't really like that either, and you get that collective chuckle. But anyway, something just to think about, you know, and think about how you are part of that fandom, or how we can do better in the Star Wars fandom. So I had one more thing that I forgot that I wanted to do before I end this video, and that was to spend a couple of minutes just talking about Star Wars or Twitter polls that I'm trying to do on my Twitter account, which I will mention at the end. And this is one I did a couple of days ago, which was a Star Wars Would You Rather. I'm trying to keep them PG Would You Rather, so don't get too many ideas about what Would You Rather is going to entail. But I like making people make difficult choices on Twitter, and so this was quite fun. So the premise that I set up was that in Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, Kylo Ren dies. And what I mean by that is Adam Driver's character dies. Adam Driver is dead. I don't mean Kylo Ren dies, but that character dies to become Ben Solo. I mean that Adam Driver is out of the picture by the end of the film. So, the Would You Rather that I presented to the Twitterverse was, would you rather that Rey kills Adam Driver, Kylo, Ben, whatever you want to call him, or would you rather that Kylo/Ben destroys himself? So that was the one I put out, and I got the results. Overwhelmingly, the response was that people would rather that Kylo/Ben destroy himself. So 68% of people answered that response, whereas the other 32% said that they would rather that Rey kill Kylo/Ben. Ben Lo, I guess we can call him, which actually is kind of confusing because we also have Reylo, so we'll forget that bit. But anyway, those are the results. So overwhelmingly, Kylo/Ben destroying himself is what people would prefer if Adam Driver's character has to die. I can think of a couple reasons for this. I feel like probably the majority of people answered because they were thinking it could be similar to how Darth Vader destroys himself at the end of Return of the Jedi by killing the Emperor and kind of sacrificing himself for the rebellion that way. So maybe they want to see Kylo do something similar, destroying himself for the good of the Resistance, and that's his way of being redeemed at the end of the movie. Whether I want to see that or not, I'm not sure. I feel like it's very similar, almost a bit too similar to Return of the Jedi, and while I don't mind homages to the original trilogy, I don't want them to be the exact same. And my one fear would be that because the Emperor is somehow back in The Rise of Skywalker, I don't want it to be the exact same situation where he's back and they need to destroy him, and Kylo is the one who ends up doing it. I think if I had to pick one, I probably would go with wanting Rey to kill him, because I think I would rather see Kylo become utterly evil and completely part of the dark side, and Rey having to kill him because of that. And maybe part of the conflict is her and Leia and the rest of the Resistance realizing that they can't convert him back to the light side, and that's a really conflicting thing. So she might have to go into their final battle wanting to save him, but realizing he can't be saved, and so having to destroy him. I feel like that'd be really interesting. I don't know how likely that is, but I'm just thinking of the two choices that I put to people on Twitter. That's the one I would kind of want to see. So anyway, so that's enough about that, and just thought that'd be a little bit interesting thing to throw in there, and maybe we'll have some more Twitter polls to discuss with my 2 cents put in at the end of them. Thanks for watching, and you can find me on Twitter at The Art of Nerd 1, and probably at some point on YouTube shortly if I keep doing these videos. Maybe if I get people actually watching them, I'll do some more. We'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and for today, may the Force be with you.